Imagine a country that rose from extreme poverty to become one of the world's greatest powers. A place that today leads in technology, builds cities in weeks, launches rockets into space, and even challenges the United States for the top spot in the world. This country exists, and its name is China. But behind all this power, behind the military strength and technological advances, there is a problem. A terrible but silent problem that grows year after year. The Chinese youth, who should be experiencing the height of prosperity, are living disillusioned, frustrated, and sad. Very sad. Even with incredible qualifications, they can't find jobs and can't live decently. This has led millions of young Chinese to give up everything, abandon their dreams, and simply let things rot. And today, we're going to dive into one of the greatest paradoxes of all time: how China became a global power and at the same time the saddest country in the world. To understand how China got here, we need to go back a few decades in time. In the 70s, China was a broken country, literally. It was coming out of decades of famine, repression, and political isolation. The Cultural Revolution had left a trail of destruction, both in the economy and among the people. But then came a name that changed everything: Deng Xiaoping. Deng wasn't a very charismatic leader. He didn't give beautiful speeches, but he had a very clear idea. If China wanted to survive, it would have to give up ideological purity and start playing the game of capitalism. And that's exactly what he did. Slowly, in a controlled and very efficient way, China began to transform. Special economic zones were created, foreign investment started to flow into the country, and millions of peasants were thrown into factories. In just a few years, the country became the world's factory. Clothes, toys, electronics, all with that little "Made in China" label. And the miracle simply happened. Entire cities appeared out of nowhere. Billions of people were lifted out of extreme poverty. The economy grew like never before in the history of humanity. China finally became a power. But this miracle came at a price that even today is being paid by the Chinese people. And this price is not cheap, because this growth was built on human sacrifice. Exploited workers, minimal rights ignored, total censorship, constant surveillance. Freedom was traded for stability. Debate, which existed until some time ago, was replaced by silence. And well-being was traded for productivity. All of this to give life to the great Chinese dream. And this dream, which at first seemed like hope for the Chinese, today for many has become a nightmare. The generation without a future. Now imagine growing up hearing that you are part of the greatest power of the 21st century, that your country is the center of the world, that the future of the planet belongs to China. But then you study your whole life, go to university, do everything right, and when you graduate, you discover there's no place for you, no vacancy, no real opportunity. Just closed doors, miserable wages, and a system that blames you for not being competitive enough. This is the portrait of Chinese youth today, a generation that grew up with grand promises, but today faces the highest youth unemployment in the modern history of the country. In 2023, official numbers showed that more than 21% of young Chinese people were unemployed. But the situation was so embarrassing that the government simply stopped releasing the data. They made the statistics disappear. First, they removed from the count those who were not looking for a job. In other words, millions of young people were erased from the equation. The message is quite clear. If you don't fit into this system, you don't exist. And this has a significant impact. Today's young Chinese are not ignorant. They know what's happening. They grew up with access to the internet, even if censored, and they see how life exists outside the red bubble. And this only worsens the feeling of frustration. They were educated to succeed in life, but they live in a system that is already crowded, saturated, and has no room for anyone else. And amidst all this, an almost philosophical idea emerges that maybe it's no longer worth fighting. And this idea has a name. It's called Bai Lan. While the government insists that young people must strive harder, Work more, compete more. A new philosophy has emerged from the shadows. The Bai Lan. In today's China, many young people have simply stopped trying. They've stopped chasing, stopped caring. And this is precisely what Bai Lan represents. It's a term that means letting it rot, the well-known act of giving up. But this isn't just a phrase or a passing trend. It's like a genuinely large movement. An entire generation raised to study to death, work to death, and when they get there, there's nothing. They remain unemployed, even though they are qualified. They are discarded from the job market. They are people living exhausted, almost invisible. They have seen that even by doing everything right, the system continues to crush them. So they decided to stop playing. And this is precisely where they stop. They refuse abusive jobs, refuse marriage, children, real estate, a traditional model of Chinese life. And instead, they seek the minimum, a simple life, almost invisible, with temporary jobs, living with their parents, spending little without dreaming too high. It's like surviving without killing themselves trying. It's that guy who refuses a job at a big company because he knows he will live in an office 14 hours a day. It's that student who no longer thinks about marrying, having kids, or even buying a house. They don't want to compete. They don't want to win. They just want to live, in the most basic way possible. This has become a form of resistance, because if you protest for real, you get arrested. If you complain on the internet, you can be censored. But if you just disappear, no longer participate, the system loses strength, and that's frightening. The government hates the Bai Lan because, for a regime that feeds on productivity, targets, and constant growth, an entire generation saying they don't want to participate in this is a real threat. They have already tried to censor videos, block terms on social networks, educate young people to be more patriotic, but none of that seems to work. The Bai Lan is not just a term, it's a consequence, the result of a country that demands everything but delivers little. And the more they press, the more people give up, more people end up quitting, and more people rot by choice. The Bai Lan is precisely a reflection of this collective exhaustion, of total burnout, of the view that the sacrifice is no longer worth it. The promise of the Chinese dream, in the end, was just a promise to keep everyone obedient. But is the life of these young people really that bad? Is it possible that such a developed and wonderful country, so perfect as shown in government propaganda, has such a poor quality of life for its youth? Well, China is a developed country, but we need to talk about one of the worst parts of this, the 996 culture. In China, there is an acronym that defines the lifestyle of millions of workers, 996. It means working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. This is the official routine of many tech companies like Alibaba, Huawei, Tencent, and even small startups that barely have a structure, but already demand this pace as if it were normal. You start young, full of dreams, and in no time, you become a work machine. And the worst part is that all this is sold as meritocracy, as the path to success, as if all this exhaustion were a trophy for you. Jack Ma himself, the founder of Alibaba, once said that 996 is a blessing, and young people should feel lucky to be able to sacrifice for the country. But this blessing, to me, has another name, which is exploitation, because behind this beautiful discourse, there is a very ugly reality. Thousands of young people collapsing from exhaustion. Some people sleep in the office, experiencing burnout at 25, 26 years old. There are cases of death from overwork, and these are things that have already become common. And when someone questions, the answer is usually the same. There's a line of people wanting that job. In other words, accept it or be replaced. But the truth is, this system is not sustainable. There is no way to live at this pace, neither physically nor emotionally. Many people work so much that they don't even have the energy to think about their own lives. It's just work, hustle, production. And in this scenario, the party scene starts to make more sense. Because between working to death and doing nothing, many people choose to do nothing. But if you think the biggest problem in these young people's lives is work, Wait until you see what happens when they try to complain. Because in China, speaking negatively is dangerous. Complaining can be risky. Thinking differently can put you in the state's crosshairs. The country has one of the largest digital censorship machines on the planet. Blocked words, deleted videos, and content disappearing without explanation. Platforms like WeChat and Weibo are closely monitored, with automatic filters that remove posts within seconds. This is not a theory, this is practice. In December 2022, a Shanghai resident was detained after using Twitter via VPN. There have been people who were arrested for complaining about the police and the government on social media, both on foreign and Chinese social networks. In November 2022, when we were having those problems that kept us at home, there were many protests in China, but after they stopped, all the videos and posts were erased from the internet. Even filmmaker Chen Pilin, who documented these demonstrations, was detained and accused of inciting disturbances. So let's say the government doesn't like civil disobedience very much, as they like to call it. China also leads the world in public surveillance with facial recognition. In cities like Shenzhen and Shanghai, millions of cameras track people's every move. This is not just security, it's also control. In more sensitive regions like Xinjiang, this can be even worse. There are citizens who are monitored even by apps forcibly installed on their phones. This is widely documented. But regarding the famous Chinese social credit system, which you're expecting me to talk about, it exists, but not in the way people imagine or report here in the West. It's not a single scorecard for each citizen, like an episode of Black Mirror. But there are indeed government and even judicial databases that list untrustworthy citizens, for example. People who haven't paid debts or committed fraud, things like that. And these people do face real punishments. They can't buy plane or train tickets. They're barred from accessing credit. Their faces are displayed on public screens as a form of humiliation. And this system is very fragmented. It varies from place to place. But we can say the fear is the same. The fear of being punished for not behaving correctly. And the youth grows up in this climate. A society where expressing pain, doubt, or rebellion can end very badly for you. So many just remain silent. They can't protest, they can't seek help, and often they can't even understand why they feel so suffocated. I know many fans of China will say yes, but they can. They can criticize, they can speak ill of the government. But it depends on what speaking ill of the government means. So everything is within an interpretation by the government itself. There is no real freedom in this scenario. It's like living in a room without air, where everyone breathes quietly to avoid attracting attention. And when you put all that together, the 996, unemployment, the hustle, surveillance, censorship, the result is the same. An entire generation that just wanted to live but was taught to stay silent, produce, and obey. China won on paper. It built entire cities from scratch, created the tallest skyscrapers on the planet, became synonymous with technological advancement, economic strength, global dominance, a country that seems successful, but inside something is broken, freedom disappeared. Rest became a luxury. The right to dream was swallowed by the duty to obey, the duty to be useful to society. Millions of people live in tiny apartments, surrounded by concrete and cameras. They work until they collapse, all in the name of a better future that never arrives. The so-called Chinese dream ended up becoming a collective nightmare. Chinese youth grew up believing they were part of something big. But now, if they look around a bit, maybe all they see is pressure, surveillance, silence, and even sadness. They should be the children of a powerhouse, but today they live as prisoners of progress. Comment below what you think about all this. Thank you very much for watching so far. And if you want to see a forbidden neighborhood in Tokyo, where people disappear without a trace, click on this video that's appearing here on your screen and come watch.